To award closeout, start with the end in mind. If we're going to kind of save the questions until the end, but if something occurs to you while we're going through the presentation, please go ahead and put it in the chat so we can make sure that we capture everybody's questions and we will address them at the end. So again, this is award closeout. Start with the end in mind. And let's see if I can get this so I can navigate. There we go. I'm Betty Rasmussen. I'm with the Office of Contracts and Grants, and I'm the Closeout and Deliverables Officer. I handle reporting, helping the PIs get their reports submitted. And then at the end of the award, I follow up to make sure that they have completed everything, submitted all their reports, make sure that the invention reports get put through, coordinate with OCG property on the property portion. And I also work with the Campus Controller's Office, CCO. And so today, Andrew Norman from CCO is joining me. And Andrew, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, hi everybody. I hope you can hear me as well as we can hear Betty. So I started at the CCO a couple years ago in the closeout team, and I also was a graduate of the university prior to that. So yeah, I think this will be a good training. Hopefully, the first of many from the CCO side as well. So with that said, I guess we can get started.
All right, first we're just going to give you a little bit of an overview. We are going to really emphasize throughout that it's really important at the very beginning of the award to start with the end in mind. It really does affect everything, and closeout goes much easier if you're always looking toward the end throughout the award. Going to talk about, well, the award's ending, what do you need to do, monitoring the project funds, equipment and property tasks, other scenarios, cost share, sub-consultants, technical reporting, and getting support from the people who are here to help you, CCO and OCG. Okay, I'm going to hand it over to Andrew.
Yeah, and just before I get started, I just wanted to say from the CCO side, a couple things to keep in mind. I know that this is a training, but CCO is by no means perfect. And our goal is to kind of to work together with departments to improve as a cohesive financial team and reduce the chance of an audit for our PIs in the university. And keep in mind that a finding or a question from the CCO is better than one from the sponsor. It's nice to find something before it is found by an auditor, but when we ask a question, it should be treated the same as if it was an audit. And also, we definitely know that DRAs have additional responsibilities beyond financial management, and we appreciate all that you guys do. So with that said, like Betty mentioned, we should start with aiming for accuracy as we're adding expenses and everything that goes on during the award. We should also be aware of the ripple effects, which kind of closeout is not one part of the whole, it's the whole condensed into one part. And if you solve one problem, it could create another problem to solve. And when that happens, definitely don't be afraid to reach out to the CCO for any financial needs or OCG for any administrative needs. And then, just like we said, we're going to be talking about how to kind of monitor your spending throughout the, monitoring all these things, EPRs, cost transfers, PETs, JEs, everything that goes on throughout the period of performance.
Okay, I kind of went a little quick there. Please forgive any technical foibles today. This is all new, uncharted territory. So Andrew's going to go ahead and talk a little bit about the monitoring of general project funds.
Yeah, and just to kind of give you a little insight, the slide that's currently up is how we should review all awards, and it's kind of what the CCO does. It's definitely the main part of my job. All the expenses on a project, we make sure that they abide by institutional policies, cost principles, UG guidelines, and then what's in the award, the terms and conditions of the award, definitely guide what can and can't be allowed on a project. And then we also consider the sponsor terms and conditions. There's a lot of variance between sponsors, and definitely some rules to keep in mind for sponsors. And then also federal regulations. A lot of our awards are federal, so we always keep those in mind as well. And you should, as we are continuing to review throughout the project. A couple other things that CCO does is we make sure that there's no overdraft spending, that expenses took place within the period of performance, and no charges are added to spend out the remainder of an award if you have remaining budget. That's a big part of any cost transfers as well. Just make sure that you aren't spending out of budgetary convenience. That's a big audit finding typically. Another part of what CCO does is making sure that the payment is correct. I know that a lot of you have questions on cash, like the cash side of things, if we've received payment, if we're missing payment. That's part of what the CCO does as well. We make sure that the payment matches the expenditures or the agreed upon fixed amount in the case of a fixed price contract. Make sure that everything is invoiced or drawn to match what is spent on the award. And then we also want to make sure that the systems reflect the actions that are taken. So a lot of the time you might not see what goes on behind the scenes with the system, PeopleSoft, MFin, and what it takes to make those appear correct and show all the expenses correctly. And then with that said, MFin reports that could be helpful to you are the trial balance summary and the award report, financial detail 2, and payments received are all ones that we use at the CCO. And I was just going to mention, I know that a lot of you use operating summary. And in the top right corner of operating summary, if you click the link with the award number on it, that'll take you to the award report, and that will show you how much cash we've received or drawn. So yeah, I think we can move on to the next slide, Betty.
Okay, that sounds great. I do want to just point out that the little mantra there that we all know about is the cost allowable, allocable, reasonable, and consistent. If you ever have any questions about whether a cost is, remember your financial analyst is going to have the final say, so you want to contact CCO for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And those 4 things are part of cost principles, which is, like I said, something that you always want to keep in mind when reviewing. And yeah, Betty's right. Reach out to your area accountant, grant accountant, me, and Closeout, somebody in the CCO, and we'll get you an answer. So before I start this next slide, I just wanted to mention some of the audit findings from NSF recently, because that will kind of let you know what is typically found and why this slide here is important. So NSF, their audit was only for 250 transactions in total, which is only 0.05 of the total transactions within every NSF award. And when they contacted us for this audit, they they gave us the feedback that when recipients of awards submit an above average number of financial adjustments, meaning cost transfers, PETs, it could be an indication of weak or non-existent internal controls. And the reason they reached out to CU specifically is that we submitted more financial adjustments than other organizations with a similar portfolio size for NSF. And some of the things that they found, which are some of the things that I'll go on to mention here, are the biggest chunk are questionable purchases near the award expiration date, meaning most likely in the last 90 days or so. The next largest chunk was purchases after the award expiration date, which is another cost transfers area. And then another one is unallocable or unreasonable travel, employee expenditures charged as participant support, unallocable transactions, and unsupported transactions. And the way that these things can be avoided are by doing things more within the period of performance, catching things earlier, and having more supporting documentation for every expense that you have on a project, especially ones that could kind of toe the line of the contract or our institution policies or cost principles that we just mentioned. So that said, onto this slide. Things that you can do to help before the end date is ask for an extension sooner rather than later if you need one, and make sure that it's justified that you need one to complete research and not just because we have to make corrections and extend the end date. Make sure you review the project to ensure allowability, like I said, using the cost principles. And then from that audit, like I mentioned, a lot of the findings came from large expenses towards the end of the project and award. So that would be like what you'd want to look out for is incurring large expenses like computers and equipment, or adding a large combination of charges that weren't added throughout the time they were actually purchased. If you can, remove any overdraft expenses. We don't want to have a budget deficit, especially after the end date. Remove any charges that did take place outside of the period of performance at the end. And then things that you want to do along the way are create PETs and make cost transfers sooner rather than later. Because like I mentioned in the audit, that was a big finding. And the later they are done, the higher the audit risk. And then at the very end of the award, you want to work with your grant accountant on the award and let them know that if there's any trouble with the sponsor sending payment or any conversations that you've had with the sponsor that the grant accountant is not aware of and could add things to correct later, you want to let them know if you plan to add or remove a charge that hasn't been completed yet. The reason being, we might report a number to the sponsor that is higher or lower than your final expenses will actually end up being. And then if your expenses are final around the end date, make sure you let a grant accountant or me and the closeout team know that they're final, so we can start looking at things earlier and trying to close the project quicker. And then another thing along the way is definitely add any justifications that you think might be things that we question along the way. Add them to InfoEd, because before I ever contact you guys, I always go through InfoEd and any place that I can find justifications And then my last resort is to ask you for more if I need them. That would just make everything easier for both of us, I think, because the less contact that you have from the CCO likely means that you're doing a good job of this. And then things that we'll go on to talk about are property, effort and PETs, cost transfers, like I said, and cost share. So I think, yeah, so on this slide, we've got EPRs. And what an EPR is effort reporting. Those are the two terms that you'll likely hear kind of interchanged. And the definition of effort reporting is that effort is work, and it's the amount of time spent by an employee on a particular activity during a certain period of time, expressed as a percentage of total time worked by that employee during the same period. So as kind of a simpler way of putting it, if a PI has two projects that they're working on two separate awards, and they're splitting their time between the two awards 50-50, then your effort on one, your effort report that you'll turn in on one will be 50% for the first project and 50% for the second, meaning that they spent a 40-hour work week, 20 hours on one project, 20 hours on another. And talking with the effort reporting accountant, which is Lynn Yang, who can be reached at epers@colorado.edu. Things that I talked with her about, things that could improve from the department side, are timely entry, supporting documentation, and thorough justification. So are kind of the same things that we're looking for every expense on the project, which is just the more documentation that you have to support something and the better description you give to have it be on the award, the better it is for us and for potential audits down the line. Things that could help you there is developing a steady process, which would be good to work with Lynn for. And if you have any questions, work with Lynn Yang throughout the period of performance as well. Like I said, it's better to catch things during the time that we're entering them than afterwards. And then with this, the CCO can definitely have more open communication with you about this and have policies to reference in order for us all to have a better understanding. For payroll expense transfers, PETs, what those are is a manual entry that moves payroll to another project. And this is typically done as an exception. So a lot of times payroll will be set up to be put on a project, but we'll need to correct it later. And same thing as any cost transfer, the sooner the better when they happen. These are kind of go hand in hand with effort. Like I mentioned, you'll need to know the effort that a PI or that any employee spent on a project in order to correctly allocate their percent of their salary. Again, this is through Lynn Yang, since they kind of go hand in hand. What she said on this one is definitely work with her throughout the period of performance again. And make sure that expenses, or in order to approve a PET, what she has to see is that expenses are at or below the budget and that they've taken place in the period of performance. So even if you're making a correction after, which should be an exception, it shouldn't happen a lot. Make sure that the period of payment happened within the period of performance. So for the next little part here, the budget, anticipating needed effort for remaining POP, kind of the actions that you need to take kind of go in the cost transfer bucket. And what a cost transfer is moving expenses between sponsored research projects or between non-restricted speed types and sponsored projects. So with cost transfers, the important thing to know with them are their high audit risk, and the less of them, the better. And your accountant to talk to for these is Kristen Bruner. And like I said, talking with her, what is needed from a department in order to approve these is a thorough explanation, able to defend and justify what you're asking for, and logical, which basically means within the cost principles. The more specific you are with your explanation and your documentation, the easier it is to complete a cost transfer, and the more justified it is if an audit was to come. And like I said at the very beginning, a cost transfer is not for budgetary convenience. So if you have budget left to spend on a project, don't add a charge just because you have the money to spend. That would be another big audit finding, and probably very not appreciated by a sponsor. What a DRA can do in order to improve the process of a cost transfer is to check in with Kristen throughout the period of performance when you're making the cost transfer. Like I said, specific and logical description and justification when you make your entry. PI statement when required, and make sure that the PI statement is just as specific and logical. I know that finance isn't their area of expertise a lot of the time, but the more that they can help with this, the less we have to bother them in their research. And then Kristen would also appreciate constructive feedback for the process of cost transfers. She actually had a training of her own a couple weeks ago. And then same thing as the EPRs and PETs, with what the CCO can do is offer more training like the one she did a couple weeks ago, and then more availability and openness to your questions and concerns for this. And then that tuition part.
Fraternity who was 34 died of the coronavirus.
I can hear somebody.
Yeah.
That's okay. In the tuition part, that would go along with the PETs. Probably another thing to keep in mind is make sure that the correct person, their expense for their payroll or tuition is on the correct project. That one's probably mostly known in your department. So I think that probably good on that. And just another thing to add is that all of the things that I'm talking about, I have in kind of a more detailed slide deck that I can share with you guys after the presentation. I forgot to mention that. I'm saying a lot more than what's on the slides, but I promise all this information will get to you at the end as well.
Okay. The award is ending. Now what? I actually don't really come into the picture till after we've gotten to the end of the award. In other words, it's done. The POP is over with. If you find yourself that there is work that needs to be done yet and you have remaining funds and you need a no-cost extension, there is an online form that you need to complete on the OCG website, and we will have those resources available for you at the end of the slide. When you fill that out, it does get routed to the appropriate grant or contract officer to initiate the no-cost extension process. The most important thing to remember is you cannot get an NCE just because you have remaining budget. You really need to have work that still needs to be completed. Andrew, I'll let you talk to the other 2 points.
Yeah, and the start cleaning up your ledger part is kind of what I've been saying. Make sure you do it. sooner rather than later. And definitely reach out to me or anybody in the CCO that you know can help you, like your area accountant or grant accountant, and we'll answer your questions, because I can tell you that I would much rather answer questions when we can make changes easier than long after the project or the award has ended. And I'm sure that some of you that are in this training right now have gotten emails from me about projects before, like long before either of us were here. And that is something that we're trying to eliminate, starting with this training. And like I said, working as a more cohesive team to close projects quicker and more efficiently. And planning ahead is part of that. Make sure that if you know there will be anything like unexpended funds or charges that you know need to be added that haven't yet, make sure you get them on as soon as you can. And if you anticipate things coming in, then make sure you're prepared to add them sooner rather than later.
Okay, equipment and property. This is a really important part of management of the award. If you've purchased any kind of property under with funds, sorry. And so there's a bunch of questions that we ask ourselves at the end of the award. You know, did we acquire any kind of equipment with the award funds? Was it provided by the sponsor or did we buy it? Who has title to equipment? And what happens to this equipment when the project is complete? So from a financial point, you need to make sure that all the expenditures for the equipment and the fabrications have been charged to the appropriate speed types and account numbers. I know that OCG Property does look at both the speed type and the account numbers when we are approving a requisition, but it's a good idea to keep an eye out on that. Just make sure that it's going to the right account number. If you have any questions, you certainly can contact us at ocgproperty@colorado.edu. Penny Matthews is the primary contact for property right now on sponsored projects, but I'm also backing her up. So there's two of us. And like I said, if you have any questions, send them to OCG Property. At the end of the project, you need to say, if you have any fabrications, are they complete and are they in service? If they are, you need to contact property accounting, Melissa Keller, so that she can get that information entered into PSAM. And then if you have equipment that's done and it's CU titled and you no longer need it, you will need to fill out a property disposal form. And we will provide that link for you. It's in the slide deck. So lots of forms to fill out. If you're getting rid of property, we need to account for it. As far as administrative tasks for property on sponsored projects, just remember, you really can't buy any property within the last 120 days of the project. We will really, really question that and really come back to you and say, okay, you know, you waited till the end here to buy something. How is it going to benefit the project? Occasionally, it does happen that you do need to get something, but just be aware of, we're going to come back to you and ask for additional justification because we really need to know, how is this going to benefit the project? If you have sponsored title property or government titled property, you will get a department closeout property request form via DocuSign from OCG Property. We need you to go ahead and review the equipment that was purchased with the award funds and let us know what you're planning to do with it. Is it something that can be used on another federally funded project? Is it something that needs to be dispositioned? Is it government titled and you want to keep it? We need to go back to the sponsor. So again, when that comes, you will want to go ahead and fill it out. You can contact us if you have any questions. We will go back to the sponsor if disposition is required. In other words, it's either sponsored title equipment, or if it's conditionally titled to CU, we need to go back and get permission from the sponsor so that we can keep it and transfer the title to us. We do file any final property reports that are required by the sponsor, though we will be coordinating the information we need with the departments on that. Government and sponsored furnished equipment, in other words, equipment that the sponsor has given us to use and we did not purchase or acquire, they need to go back to the sponsor at the end of the project. And one of the most common things, sometimes the sponsors will give us laptops for certain projects. We don't actually own those. Those aren't really our asset in any way. And they will be called out specifically in the award document. So there is a difference between acquired or purchased property that is sponsored titled and sponsored furnished equipment. With sponsored furnished equipment, they give it to us. We don't actually expend any award funds to purchase it or acquire it. I hope that makes sense. I feel like I'm kind of babbling here. I apologize. If you have any questions about the difference of the different kinds of property that can appear on an award, just let us know. Okay, subrecipients and cost share. Okay, we have a few tips for subrecipient closeout. You, like everything else, you want to keep tabs on the financial and technical status of the sub-statement of work. Ultimately, the PI is responsible for making sure that the sub does complete the statement of work, bills accordingly, bills on time, so that we can get them paid. And let's see, there we go. You want to confirm that the sub has successfully completed all the work. The subs team will be involved with the closeout of the sub. They'll verify with you in the department that all the work is complete and that all invoices have been received. They will actually close out the purchase order. And they also send out a sub-award closeout and certification form to the sub-recipient that they will need to complete and return to us. Just another note that I wanted to leave you with, that the subs team does indeed close out the purchase orders. And they will verify with the department prior to closing it. So it's not an automatic process, but something you do need to know, that at the end of the fiscal year, our fiscal year, any purchase order that has less than $1 is automatically closed by PSC. The subs team will send out a list of these POs to the departments for verification. However, if you don't reply, they're going to go ahead and close it out. So if you have a sub that you're going to extend their period of performance and you need to keep that purchase order open, be sure you respond to that. Okay. There we go. I'm not sure what happened. All right. Okay, very good. Sorry about that. Sorry about the technical difficulties. And thank you for your patience and bearing with us. I'm going to hand it back over to Andrew so he can talk a little bit about cost share.
Yeah, and I'm actually learning stuff about OCG as we go too. So I wanted to mention real quick too on property things that could help Melissa, who is the accountant for property, that a PO number in the description line is a very good way to help and speed things up for her. Seeing it in the description line will make it easier rather than trying to find it herself. that was one thing that I definitely got talking to her. But yeah, on to cost share. So cost share, what it is it covers the additional contributions and support towards a project or award that wasn't given by the sponsor. And for this one, Janelle Forbes is your contact at CCO. So again, another thing along the theme of what I've been talking about and what Betty's been talking about is documentation and properly labeled account codes. Things that Janelle mentioned could help are that expenses adhere to or exactly match the budget. When things are spent according to the budget that's set up, it makes things go a lot quicker and a lot smoother when it comes to closeout. A couple of things that she mentioned CCO will be doing soon are fringe. Well, we already do fringe and F&A monitor and correction, and then having that appear in the necessary MFIN reports so that she can see it and you all can see it. That's two things that we're working on as the CCO right now. But just like the rest of the things that I've talked about, it's along the theme of keeping documentation really specific and thorough. And yeah, I think working with Janelle along the period of performance as well would help this one as well.
Okay, on to technical reporting. This is my specialty. It's very important that the PI stay current with any required technical reports, because we're going to be looking at the end of the project to make sure that everything that's been required by the sponsor has been submitted. I do send out reminders for annual reports and quarterly reports and final reports, and I'm always willing to help if there's any questions. Very important that when we get to the end of the POP, the PI starts working on their final report. Most final reports do need to be submitted within 90 days of the end of the period of performance. However, there are a couple of sponsors, most notably NSF and NIH. They do get 120 days, but I will let you know that both those sponsors really expect those reports to be completed and submitted by the deadline. They will start sending out their nasty notices if you're a day late. So really a good idea to just, gently remind the PI, as I will be doing as well, that they do have that final report that does need to be completed. In addition to the technical report, which is basically the narrative of what the research found and that piece, the technical report, we also need to report on any new technology or patents or inventions that were developed during the course of the award. OCG does take care of filing those final invention statements, but the PI would need to be working with venture partners during the course of the award to disclose the technology shortly after it occurs. They are the people who will support the PI. If you have any questions, you can always contact me. I'll get you hooked up with who you need to be hooked up with. But as long as you've worked with venture partners, we'll make sure that we do get, the paperwork in at the end of the project. Okay. All right, so now fun and games. We're going to go ahead and we're going to do a little quiz through Kahoot. And if any of you have recently attended any OCG trainings, this is a fun little piece that we have started to do. And let's see, I think I have this set up somewhere and I gotta see if I can find it. Where is it? Oh, here I found it. There we go. All right. So you need to go to, and I'm going to mute the lobby sounds. Yeah. It's a little loud. You need to go to www.kahoot.it or with the Kahoot app on your phone. That's the game pin. And there's no judgment with this game, by the way. Doesn't show people's score. It'll show who won